The first time my mother-in-law called me temporary, she said it like she was describing a seasonal throw pillow. We were standing in the kitchen that never seemed to get dirty because I was the one who kept wiping down counters no one else noticed. Diane Whitmore had her hair set in that smooth, expensive bob that never moved, even when her emotions did. She watched me rinse strawberries for the brunch she'd insisted on hosting for people she didn't like. "You're just here for now," she said, not looking up from her phone. "Until you two get on your feet." I'd been married to her son for 8 months. I swallowed the sting and told myself it was a misunderstanding, a clumsy word choice. Diane's favorite defense was plausible deniability. She could slice you open with one sentence and then smile as if she'd offered you a compliment. I'd moved into the Whitmore house because Ethan said it was the smart thing to do. The rent on our apartment had jumped. His commission checks came in waves, and my student loan payment didn't care about anyone's transitional season. We'd talked about it like adults, like partners. Just 6 months, we promised each other. We'll save for a down payment. We'll be out before the holidays. Then the holidays came. Then the next set of holidays started to loom, and somehow, without a single dramatic conversation, I became part of the furniture in their house. Useful when I was polishing, inconvenient when I was breathing. In the beginning, I tried so hard to be easy to have around. I folded my sweaters smaller so they took up less space in the guest room closet. I switched to decaf because Diane said the smell of coffee clung. I learned the rhythm of the household. Richard Whitmore left for the office at 6:15 a.m. Diane went to Pilates at 9. Brooke breezed in late morning if she had time. And Ethan, my Ethan, moved through it all like a man trying not to bump into walls. Ethan was the kind of handsome that made strangers believe he was kind before he'd spoken a word. He was tall, warm-eyed, and so practiced at smoothing things over that even his silences felt like apologies. That was the version of him I'd married. The man who wrapped both hands around my face when he kissed me, like he was grateful I existed. Living in his parents' house didn't turn him into a villain. It turned him into a child again. And I learned quickly that children don't protect their wives. They try not to get in trouble. Diane didn't yell. She didn't need to. She used little comments the way other people used salt. Constantly, automatically, convinced she was improving everything. "You're up early," she'd say when I came downstairs in leggings to make oatmeal. "Trying to look busy?" Or, "Oh, you cooked again. How industrious." Or the one that really got under my skin. "I forget you're here sometimes." I started to believe her. I moved through rooms as quietly as I could, like my presence was a noise complaint waiting to happen. But the Whitmores had a way of making you feel responsible for everything they never said out loud. The house was large, glossy, curated. White walls, statement art, a chandelier that looked like frozen fireworks. And yet there was an undertone of panic under all that polish. A feeling that if the wrong person looked too closely, everything might crack. I didn't understand why at first. Then Richard asked me for a favor. It was a Tuesday, the kind of day that tasted like leftover stress. I was in the kitchen again, always the kitchen, packing Ethan's lunch because he'd forgotten, and Diane had already left for Pilates with a breezy, "Don't wait up," like she was going on tour. Richard came in wearing a button-down, and that careful expression men adopt when they're trying to make something sound casual. "Claire," he said, as if he'd just remembered my name was attached to the body in his house. "You're good with numbers, right?" I had been good with numbers, before I became temporary, before my job at a mid-sized accounting firm became something I'd paused because the commute was brutal and Diane had made it very clear she didn't want strangers in the house. And also Ethan's schedule was unpredictable. And also I'd believed, foolishly, that a wife should be flexible. I'd told myself I'd find something new once we moved out. "Sure," I said, cautious. He set a folder down on the counter. It looked thick, too thick for a simple favor. "We're just reorganizing some accounts. The company's in a growth phase. I could use a second set of eyes." The company. That was always the phrase, like saying the name would be a confession. Whitmore Development was what their friends called legacy, which really meant Richard had inherited a small construction outfit and turned it into something that built upscale townhomes and renovated commercial spaces. Their lives were wrapped around it. The charity galas Diane hosted for the community, the membership fees, the vacations, the conversations that stopped when I walked in. I glanced at the folder. "Doesn't your CFO handle this?" Richard smiled without warmth. "We're transitioning. I'd rather keep it in the family." In the family. The phrase landed heavy. It didn't include me, not really. But it was close enough to make me feel flattered. Like maybe this was my chance to be useful in a way that earned me a seat at the table instead of a place in the corner. So I opened the folder. At first, it looked like normal business mess. Invoices, ledger printouts, wire confirmations. But then my brain did what it always did with numbers. It started stacking patterns, noticing where the rhythm broke. Payments rounded too neatly. Vendors with near-identical names. Transfers that traveled in circles, landing back where they started after passing through accounts that felt unnecessary. I didn't say anything right away. I thought maybe I was missing context. Maybe there was a legitimate reason. I didn't want to accuse my husband's father of anything. But the deeper I went, the more my stomach tightened. There were shell companies, not even clever ones, LLCs formed within weeks of each other, addresses that traced back to mailboxes, invoices that looked like templates with different fonts. Money moving out of Whitmore Development into consulting and materials, then reappearing elsewhere. It wasn't just sloppy, it was deliberate. I flipped a page and saw a charitable foundation name I recognized, Whitmore Community Futures. Diane talked about it all the time at parties, how important it was, how it was their giving arm. I stared at the numbers. The foundation was paying Whitmore Development for project management services, thousands at a time. Then Whitmore Development was paying consultants. Then those consultants were transferring money back. My pulse thudded in my ears. I could hear the refrigerator hum like it was holding its breath. Richard watched me, eyes sharp. "Anything stand out?" My throat went dry. In that moment, I understood something I hadn't let myself understand yet. Richard didn't want a second set of eyes. He wanted a second set of hands. Someone who could look at this and decide it was fine. Or someone who could help make it fine. I forced my voice to stay even. "It's complicated. There are some things I'd want to clarify." He leaned closer, lowering his tone like we were sharing a secret. "You're smart, Claire. Ethan tells me you're very detail-oriented. I don't need perfect. I just need clean. Clean." The word made my skin prickle. I should have walked away right then. I should have told Ethan. I should have insisted we move out that week, even if we had to live in a tiny studio with mismatched furniture. I should have protected myself. Instead, I nodded. Because I was tired of being treated like dead weight. Because I wanted Ethan's family to see me as an asset, not an inconvenience. Because part of me believed that if I helped them, they'd finally let me belong. That's how it started. At first, I told myself I wasn't doing anything wrong. I wasn't forging documents or creating fraud. I was organizing. I was reconciling. I was making sure the books were presentable. I convinced myself I was just applying professional skills to a messy file. But once you touch something dirty, it sticks to you. It works its way under your nails, and you can't pretend you're clean. Richard began leaving more folders. Diane began asking questions about donor receipts while she sipped lemon water like she was discussing flower arrangements. Brooke, Ethan's younger sister, started dropping comments about how lucky I was to have something to do. "You must be bored," she said one afternoon, perched on a bar stool in a silk blouse that cost more than my car payment. "At least now you're earning your keep." She smiled when she said it, like it was playful. I laughed like it was funny. That was the sick part. I learned to laugh at myself so they wouldn't have to. Ethan didn't ask many questions. That was his specialty, staying just far enough away from anything uncomfortable that he could claim ignorance later. When he did notice me hunched over spreadsheets at the dining room table, he'd kiss the top of my head and say, "You're amazing." Like admiration could replace action. I'd whisper, "We need to talk." And he'd say, "After this week, I swear, things are crazy." There was always a week. One night, close to midnight, I found an email chain printed out and tucked into the wrong folder. It looked like someone had dropped it by mistake, a small slip in a system built on control. The subject line made my heart jump. Bank request. Clarification needed. I read it standing up because sitting felt too vulnerable. The bank was asking about irregularities in a construction loan draw. A project had been billed for materials that didn't match the inspection report. Richard's reply was smooth, almost charming, full of assurances and attachments and the kind of language that made lies sound like customer service. But the last email wasn't from Richard. It was from a name I didn't recognize, sent from a personal account. Short. Sharp. "If they push, we move it through futures again. She'll fix it." She. I stared at the page until my eyes burned. I wasn't family. I wasn't even a person to them. I was a function. A quiet, pliable tool in the background who made problems go away. I should have torn the email up. I should have confronted Richard with it, thrown it on the counter like a grenade. I should have told Ethan, demanded he choose between his wife and his family's rot. Instead, I put it back in the folder with careful hands. Because by then, I'd started protecting their secrets. Not because I respected them, not because I believed they deserved loyalty, but because I was afraid. Afraid of what would happen if I didn't. Afraid of what it would mean for Ethan. Afraid of being blamed for the very mess I'd been pulled into. And deep down, ashamed that I'd let myself become part of it. My life narrowed. Days blurred into chores and spreadsheets and comments designed to keep me small. Diane began leaving lists on the fridge, things she wanted done, without ever saying thank you. It was always framed as helping out, but the expectation was iron. "Since you're home," she'd say, "could you just run to the post office? Oh, and schedule the HVAC service. And call the foundation's event planner." "You have time, don't you?" Time. Yes. I had time because I'd given up my job and my independence to live in her house and keep her family's image polished. Ethan, meanwhile, stayed late at work more often. He said he was hustling, trying to build our future. When I hinted that I felt lonely, he'd pull me into his arms and say, "It's temporary, Claire. We're almost there." Almost there became his lullaby. He'd hum it into my hair while I lay awake, wondering when there would stop moving. The breaking point didn't come from the spreadsheets. It came from dinner. It was a Sunday night, and Diane had invited 2 couples from their country club. People who wore their wealth like perfume. Expensive. Impossible to ignore. Diane was in hostess mode, floating through the dining room with effortless charm. Richard told stories about projects and permits and this crazy market. Brooke laughed too loudly at everything. Ethan sat beside me, knee occasionally brushing mine under the table, a quiet reminder that he was present. One of the women, Linda, glanced at me and smiled. "So, Claire, what do you do?" It was a normal question. It shouldn't have felt like a trap. But the table went slightly still, like everyone was waiting to see how I'd answer. Before I could speak, Diane did. "Oh, Claire's figuring things out," she said, pouring wine. "You know how it is with young people these days. Lots of transitions." Linda blinked. "Oh, but you worked in finance, didn't you?" I felt heat creep up my neck. "Accounting," I said softly. "I used to work at..." Diane waved a hand. "She's been home lately. We're helping them save. It's sweet, really. She's so grateful." The word grateful landed like a slap. I looked at Ethan, waiting for him to correct her. To say, "Actually, my wife is brilliant. Actually, she sacrificed her job to support us. Actually, she's not a charity case." Ethan smiled weakly and said, "Yeah, it's been good. Good." The conversation moved on, but my chest tightened with each laugh. I watched Diane bask in attention, watched Richard play the confident patriarch, watched Brooke scroll her phone between jokes like none of it mattered. And I realized something with brutal clarity. They didn't just see me as a burden. They needed me to be one. If I was the needy daughter-in-law they were helping, then they were generous. If I was the quiet wife who stayed home, then no one asked why Whitmore Community Futures numbers didn't quite make sense. If I was small, they were safe. Dessert came. Diane served mini cheesecakes on antique plates, as if presentation could erase cruelty. Linda took a bite and sighed happily. "Diane, you're amazing. Honestly, I don't know how you do it all." Diane laughed. "I have help," she said, eyes flicking to me. "Claire is very eager." Eager. The word tasted like metal. Then Richard, halfway through his coffee, said casually, "Of course, we all pull our weight in this family." He didn't look at me directly. He didn't have to. My fork paused mid-air. Brooke smirked. Some more than others. The couples laughed politely, unsure, and Diane gave that little smile she used when she wanted to look like she wasn't enjoying something she absolutely was. I set my fork down. My hand was steady, but my insides were shaking. "I do pull my weight," I said. The table quieted. Ethan's knee stopped brushing mine. Diane blinked slowly. "Oh, honey." "No," I said, voice calm in a way that surprised even me. "I clean. I cook. I manage the foundation's receipts. I've reconciled your accounts for months. I've fixed errors that would have raised questions if anyone outside this house looked too closely." Richard's face tightened. Diane's smile froze. Brooke's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed, like a cat spotting movement. Ethan turned toward me, whispering, "Claire." But I was already past the edge. Linda looked uncomfortable. The other couple stared at their plates. Diane recovered first, because Diane always recovered first. Claire, she said, laugh light. That's not appropriate dinner conversation. I'm sorry, I said, still calm. You're right. It's not. I pushed my chair back and stood. My heartbeat was loud, but my voice didn't crack. Excuse me. Ethan grabbed my wrist under the table, gentle but urgent. Please don't do this. Don't do this. As if speaking was the crime. I looked down at his hand on me and thought about how many times I'd swallowed my words for his comfort. How many times I'd let his family's disrespect slide because I didn't want to cause tension. How many times I'd protected secrets that weren't mine to keep. I slipped my wrist free and walked out of the dining room. In the hallway, my breath came in shallow bursts. I pressed my palm to the wall as if the house could steady me. From behind me, I heard Diane's laughter resume, a little too bright. Then Ethan followed. He caught up to me in the kitchen, where the lights were harsh and the counters gleamed. He looked frantic, like he'd misplaced something precious and fragile. "What was that?" he hissed. I stared at him. "That was me telling the truth." "You embarrassed my mom," he said, voice tight. I laughed once, sharp. "Your mom embarrassed me." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "You know how she is. You can't take everything personally." The sentence hit me harder than Diane's comments ever had. "You can't take everything personally," I repeated. "Ethan, I'm your wife. This is personal." He looked pained. "Claire, please, not tonight. They're here. We'll talk tomorrow." Tomorrow. Again. Something inside me went quiet. Not like peace, like a door closing. "I found an email," I said softly. Ethan blinked. "What?" "One of your dad's folders. It said..." My throat tightened, but I forced the words out. "It said if the bank pushes, they'll move it through the foundation again, and that I'll fix it." Ethan's face drained of color. "Why are you going through his folders?" He didn't say, "What does that mean?" He didn't say, "Are they doing something illegal?" He didn't say, "Are you okay?" He said, "Why are you going through his folders?" I stared at him until my vision blurred. "Because he gave them to me." Ethan's jaw worked. "Claire, you don't understand how this works. My dad has been under pressure. The market, the lenders, everything. It's complicated." Complicated was the word people used to make wrongdoing sound like math. "Are they laundering money?" I asked. Quiet. Ethan looked away. That was my answer. I felt something cold slide through my chest. "And you knew." He swallowed. "I knew there were strategies." "Strategies," I echoed, almost amused by the absurdity. "Is that what you call moving money through a charity?" Ethan stepped closer, voice pleading. "It's not like that. The foundation helps people. My mom..." "Your mom uses it," I said, and my voice finally shook. "To look good. And your dad uses it to hide." Ethan's eyes were wet. "If you say something, you'll destroy them." Destroy them. Not us. Not me. Them. I breathed in, slow. "And if I keep quiet, what happens to me?" Ethan hesitated. That tiny pause was everything. I nodded to myself. "Okay." Ethan reached for my hands. "Claire, please, we can figure it out. Just don't make it worse." I pulled back. "I'm not the one who made it." He flinched like I'd hit him. In the dining room, Diane's laughter floated again, a sound that now felt like a signal. Get back in your place. I looked at Ethan, the man I loved, the man I had bent myself into smaller shapes for, and I realized he couldn't see me clearly in this house. Not as a partner, not as someone to defend. He saw me through his family's lens, an accessory, a problem to manage quietly. I walked past him and went upstairs. In the guest room, my room, the room I had tried to make feel like ours, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my hands. They were steady. That scared me more than shaking would have. I opened my laptop. I didn't know exactly what I was doing yet. I just knew I needed air, space, options. I pulled up our savings account. I pulled up the credit card statements. I pulled up the folder where I'd started saving copies of documents months ago. Not to hurt them, I told myself, but to protect me. To prove I hadn't created what I'd been asked to clean. My heart thudded as I scrolled. There were wire transfers I hadn't noticed before, tagged with initials. There was a line item in the foundation's disbursements that looked like a vendor payment but had no matching invoice. There was an email from Diane to the event planner mentioning donor expectations in a way that felt more like bribery than philanthropy. I sat there until my eyes ached. Then I heard Diane's voice downstairs, clear despite the distance. Some people just don't know their place. Brooke laughed. My stomach turned. Ethan said nothing. That was it. That was the moment I stopped trying to earn love from people who needed me to stay small. I didn't pack dramatically. I didn't throw drawers open and sob into sweaters. I moved with quiet precision, like a person who had finally accepted reality. I pulled my suitcase from the closet. I folded clothes, not small this time, normal, full-sized, as if I was allowed to exist. I grabbed my toiletry bag. I took the framed photo from our wedding that Diane had placed on a shelf like an obligation. I hesitated at the documents folder. My fingers hovered over it. Taking it felt like crossing a line. Leaving it felt like leaving my throat exposed. I slipped it into my bag. Ethan knocked softly after midnight. Claire? I didn't answer. He knocked again, louder. Claire, open the door. I stood in the center of the room, suitcase zipped, heart steady in that terrifying way. I imagined opening the door and seeing his face, imagined him convincing me to stay with promises of tomorrow. I imagined myself shrinking again. I walked to the door and opened it. Ethan stood there in sweatpants, hair messy, eyes red-rimmed. He looked like he did the night we'd fought about moving in here, frightened, earnest, hopeful that love could patch over everything. Where are you going? He whispered, seeing the suitcase. I'm leaving, I said. His breath hitched. It's the middle of the night. I know. He stepped inside, reaching for me. Please don't do this. Not like this. Like what? I asked, voice even. Quietly? So your mom doesn't have to hear it? Ethan's face crumpled. Claire, I love you. I believed him. That was the tragedy. He loved me in the way he knew how. Soft, private, apologetic. But love that only exists when it's convenient isn't shelter. It's a decoration. I love you too, I said, and it felt like grief. But I can't keep living in a house where I'm treated like a burden and used like a tool. Ethan shook his head. They don't mean it like that. They do, I said quietly. And you let them. His eyes filled. I didn't know what to do. You could have chosen me, I said. Ethan looked at my suitcase again, panic rising. Where will you go? I hesitated. I didn't have a perfect plan. I had a friend, Maya, who had offered her couch once when I joked about needing an escape. I had a credit card. I had my own brain. For the first time in months, those things felt like enough. I'll figure it out, I said. Ethan grabbed my hand, desperate. Claire, if you leave, everything blows up. There it was. Not, I'll miss you. Not, I'll come with you. Not, let's start over. Everything blows up. I looked at him, letting the silence stretch until he had to hear himself. You mean your family's secrets, I said. Ethan swallowed. I mean, my dad, my mom. I've been protecting them, I said, and my voice finally broke a little, not with weakness, but with anger at myself. I've been cleaning up things I shouldn't have touched. I've been swallowing insults so you wouldn't have to feel uncomfortable. I've been doing that for you. Ethan whispered. I didn't ask you to. You benefited anyway, I said. The words hung between us like smoke. Ethan's grip loosened. He looked down, ashamed, and for a second I saw the man he could be, if he ever stopped being their son first. I can fix it, he said faintly. Just stay. Give me time. Time was the currency Ethan always asked for. Time I paid with my dignity. No, I said gently. I'm done waiting. He looked up, tears on his lashes. Are you going to tell someone? I stared at him. I'm going to stop lying. He flinched. I walked past him, suitcase rolling softly over the carpet. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel peaceful. It felt like the pause before a storm. As I went down the stairs, I glanced at the family photos lining the wall. Richard shaking hands with politicians, Diane in gowns beside charity banners, Brooke posing in designer sunglasses, Ethan smiling in every frame like the world had always been kind to him. In those pictures, I was barely present, a new addition, a background figure, proof of Ethan's adulthood. I opened the front door. Cold air hit my face, sharp and clean. I inhaled like my lungs had been waiting for it. My car was parked in the driveway, dusted with frost. I loaded my suitcase in the trunk and sat behind the wheel, hands on the steering wheel, heart thudding. Through the front window, I saw Ethan standing in the hallway, watching me like he wanted to memorize the moment, like he wanted to stop me without having to fight anyone. I started the engine. As I backed out, the Whitmore house looked the same as it always had. Perfect, polished, immovable. But I knew something they didn't yet. Their perfection was being held together by the person they'd treated like a burden. And I had just walked away. Maya didn't ask questions at first. That's what made her a lifeline. She opened her apartment door in sweatpants and a messy bun, took one look at my face, and stepped aside. Come in, she said, like she'd been expecting me. Her place smelled like cinnamon candles and laundry detergent, the kind of ordinary comfort I hadn't realized I'd been starving for. She handed me a blanket and a mug of tea before she offered advice. She let me sit on her couch, staring at nothing, while the adrenaline drained out of my body. It wasn't until the sun started to creep through the blinds that she said softly, "Do you want to tell me what happened?" I wrapped my hands around the mug. My fingers trembled now that I was safe enough to shake. I left. Maya nodded like that made complete sense. Good. 2 days earlier, if someone had told me leaving would feel like relief, I would have argued. I would have said love is complicated. Marriage is work. Families are messy. I would have defended Ethan with the loyalty of a woman trained to take on emotional labor like it's oxygen. Now, in Maya's quiet living room, I realized how exhausted I was from defending people who wouldn't defend me. I think they're doing something illegal, I said. Maya's eyebrows lifted. Like, how illegal? I let out a humorless laugh. Money moving through their charity. Fake vendors cleaning it up. And they pulled me into it. Maya's face hardened. Claire, I didn't start it, I said quickly, shame flaring. But I helped make it look normal. I thought I don't know. I thought if I helped, they'd stop treating me like I was taking up space. Maya reached over and squeezed my knee. You're not stupid for wanting to be loved. The words loosened something in my chest. Tears came fast, hot, humiliating. I cried into my hands while Maya sat beside me, steady as a wall. When I could speak again, I said, I brought copies. Not to hurt them, I needed proof, in case they tried to blame me. Maya's gaze sharpened. They will try. Her certainty scared me. It also steadied me, because part of me still wanted to believe the Whitmores were cruel, but not dangerous. That Ethan loved me, so surely he wouldn't let them destroy me. But love didn't erase power. And the Whitmores had power like other families had kitchen chairs, so normal to them they didn't notice it. By the end of that week, my phone was a graveyard of missed calls. Diane called first, then Brooke, then Richard, then Ethan, again and again, as if repetition could summon obedience. The messages shifted in tone, like stages of grief. Diane started with syrupy concern. Claire, honey, where are you? Ethan is worried sick. This is not the way a mature woman handles conflict. Then the blade slid in. You're overreacting. You've always been sensitive. Call me so we can talk like adults. Then the threat, wrapped in politeness. I hope you're not making choices you'll regret. Brooke's texts were worse because she didn't bother pretending. You're insane. You're ungrateful. Don't forget who took you in when you had nothing. I stared at that one for a long time, because it was the Whitmores' favorite myth, that I'd arrived at their doorstep empty-handed and they'd generously given me life. In reality, I'd had a career, a small apartment, friends, a sense of self. I'd handed those things away for a marriage I believed in. Ethan's messages were the only ones that sounded human. They were full of apology and panic and that familiar plea for time. Please talk to me. I can get us a hotel for a few days. Just come back so we can figure it out. My mom is freaking out. My dad is stressed. I need you. I love you. I don't know what to do. I read them and felt grief like a bruise, because Ethan's pain was real. But so was his pattern. He needed me to come back, not because he'd chosen me, but because my absence revealed everything he'd been trying to pretend wasn't happening. The Whitmore house ran on quiet compliance. I had been one of the gears. When I stepped out, the machine started grinding. It happened faster than I expected. On the Monday after I left, Richard showed up at Maya's building. I saw his car from the window first. Sleek, expensive, perfectly washed. It looked out of place on Maya's street, where most people's vehicles wore a thin layer of dust, like evidence of normal life. My stomach dropped. My body remembered fear before my mind could catch up. Maya crossed her arms. Do you want me to tell him to leave? I swallowed. I'll talk to him. Part of me wanted to hide. Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face, But another part, the part that had been trained to be reasonable, knew that ignoring powerful men only made them louder. I walked downstairs and stepped outside. Richard stood beside his car like he'd stepped out of a brochure. Crisp shirt, expensive watch, controlled expression. "Claire," he said, as if he was greeting me at a fundraiser, "we need to discuss your misunderstanding." I kept my voice neutral. "This isn't a misunderstanding." He sighed, like I was inconveniencing him. "Ethan is distraught. Diane hasn't slept. You've created unnecessary drama." I almost laughed. Unnecessary. Richard's eyes flickered, a brief flash of irritation. "You're emotional." "I understand, but you need to think practically." "Practically," I repeated. "Okay. Practically, I was asked to handle financial documents that didn't look legal." His jaw tightened. "Be careful." The words were quiet, but the warning was loud. I met his gaze. "I'm being careful. That's why I kept records." For the first time, Richard's control slipped. His eyes sharpened. "What records?" I felt my heart thud, but I didn't look away. "Enough to protect myself." Richard took a step closer. "Claire, you don't want to do this. You're part of this now, whether you like it or not." The air turned cold. My skin prickled. "I didn't create it," I said, voice steady. "I was pulled into it." Richard's smile returned, thin and dangerous. "You're married to my son. That makes you family. Family shares consequences." My stomach twisted. "Is that what you call it? Consequences?" He lowered his voice. "If you go to anyone, an attorney, the IRS, anyone, there will be fallout. For Ethan. For you." I stared at him. "Is that a threat?" Richard's smile didn't move. "It's advice." Advice. Strategies. Clean. Words the Whitmores used to make harm sound like professionalism. I felt my fear shift into something harder. "I'm not protecting you anymore," I said. Richard's eyes narrowed. "You think you have leverage? You're living on a friend's couch. You don't have income. You don't have a lawyer. You have nothing." He was wrong, and the fact that he couldn't see it made me almost pity him. "I have the truth," I said, "and I have the ability to stop lying." Richard stared at me for a long beat, then exhaled through his nose like I was a stubborn child. "Think about Ethan," he said finally. "Don't be selfish." Selfish. The word they used whenever I tried to protect myself. Richard turned and got into his car. As he drove away, I realized my hands were shaking so hard I could barely curl them into fists. I went back upstairs and told Maya, "I need a lawyer." Maya nodded. "Yeah, you do." The lawyer I found wasn't glamorous. She didn't wear stilettos or bark orders like a TV character. Her name was Susan Halpern, and her office smelled faintly like paper and lemon cleaner. She had kind eyes and a voice that didn't rise, even when the subject matter did. When I laid the documents on her desk, Susan's expression sharpened with quiet seriousness. "This is substantial," she said. My mouth went dry. "How bad?" Susan tapped a page gently. "Potential tax issues. Potential bank fraud, misuse of charitable funds. I'm not saying they're guilty. I'm saying these are the kinds of patterns that get attention." Attention. That was the word that mattered. Because the Whitmores didn't fear morality. They feared exposure. Susan leaned back. "What do you want, Claire?" I stared at her. My instinct was to say, "I want my marriage back. I want Ethan to choose me. I want this all to be a nightmare I wake up from." But I'd learned that wanting didn't change reality. Only actions did. "I want to protect myself," I said. "I want a clean separation. And I want them to stop using me as a shield." Susan nodded slowly. "Then we move carefully." Carefully. A different kind of careful than Richard's. Susan advised me not to contact any authorities immediately unless I was directly implicated or threatened further. She started with the immediate: legal separation, financial boundaries, documenting communication. She also told me something that made my stomach lurch. "They may try to claim you did this," she said. "They may frame you as the one who mishandled accounts." My throat tightened. Ethan wouldn't let them. Susan gave me a gentle look. "Ethan may not have control. And even if he does, denial makes people cruel." That night, Ethan finally showed up, alone. He stood outside Maya's building, hands shoved in his jacket pockets like he didn't know what to do with them. When I walked out to meet him, his face crumpled with relief and guilt. "Claire," he breathed. "Thank God." I stayed a few feet away. He tried to step closer. I held up a hand. "Don't." Ethan froze, pain flashing across his face. "I just want to talk." "Then talk," I said. He swallowed. "My dad said you're holding documents. That you're threatening them." I stared at him. "Is that what you believe?" Ethan's eyes darted away. "I don't know what to believe. Everything is chaos. My mom is crying. Brooke is screaming. Your dad threatened me," I said, cutting through. Ethan's head snapped up. "What?" "He came here," I said. "He told me I'm part of this now. That if I talk, there will be fallout for me." Ethan's face went pale. "He wouldn't." "He did," I said, voice flat. "And your first reaction is still to manage the situation, not to protect me." Ethan looked shattered. "Claire, I'm here, aren't I?" I felt something in me soften, then harden again. Being here now didn't erase months of silence. "I hired a lawyer," I said. Ethan flinched like I'd slapped him. "A lawyer? Claire, come on." "No," I said, calm. "I'm done being the only adult in this marriage." Ethan's eyes filled. "I love you. I want you back." I studied him in the streetlight. His sincerity was real. His helplessness was also real. And that helplessness had cost me my dignity. "What are you willing to do?" I asked quietly. "Not say. Do." Ethan swallowed. "Anything." "Move out," I said. His breath caught. "Choose me," I continued, voice steady. "Not in private, in the hallway, with tears. Choose me in daylight. Tell your parents you won't tolerate how they treated me. Tell your father you won't ask me to cover anything again. Walk away from whatever you know is wrong." Ethan looked like he'd been asked to cut off a limb. "It's not that simple." "It never was. Not for him." I nodded slowly. "Then neither is getting me back." Ethan's shoulders sagged. "Claire, if my dad goes down, everything goes down. The business, the foundation, the house. And maybe that's what should happen," I said, surprising myself with how calm it sounded. Maybe the thing you're trying to save isn't worth saving. Ethan's lips trembled. You don't understand. They'll destroy you with us. They'll say you did it. I have proof, I said. And I'm not afraid of the truth anymore. Ethan looked at me like he didn't recognize me, like he'd expected me to come back, quiet and apologetic, so the machine could run smoothly again. You've changed, he whispered. I almost smiled. I'm remembering. Ethan's eyes squeezed shut. Please, just give me time. And there it was again, his favorite request. I shook my head. No. Ethan opened his eyes, desperate. What do you want from me? I felt tears prick, but I didn't let them fall. I want you to stop asking me to be the cushion between you and your family. I want you to stop making me pay for your peace. Ethan stood there, breathing hard, like a man staring at a cliff edge. I can't, he said finally, voice breaking. Not yet. Not yet meant not ever. I nodded once. Okay. Ethan reached for me and I stepped back. Claire, he whispered, voice raw. Please don't do anything that ruins us. I looked at him, and for a moment, grief washed over me so strongly I thought I might fold in half. Then I said the truth I'd been avoiding for months. Ethan, you already let them ruin us. I turned and walked back inside. The fallout began the next morning, and it didn't start with sirens or headlines. It started with whispers. Diane's friends stopped calling. The country club invitations slowed. Brooke posted a vague Instagram story about betrayal and snakes in the grass, then deleted it when someone asked questions. Richard's office called Susan. They didn't call to apologize. They called to negotiate. They offered money first. A settlement. A generous one, dressed up as concern for my well-being. Susan told them no. Then they offered conditions. Silence clauses. Non-disparagement. An agreement that I'd return all documents and sign a statement claiming I'd handled accounts independently. Susan's voice was calm when she repeated it to me. They want you to take the fall. My stomach rolled, but I wasn't surprised anymore. Not really. A family that could treat me like a burden could also treat me like a scapegoat. Susan filed for legal separation and demanded all communication go through counsel. The Whitmores hated that. It removed their favorite weapon, direct emotional manipulation. Still, Diane tried. She sent a handwritten letter because Diane believed handwriting made cruelty look sincere. It was 3 pages of soft blame. She wrote about family values, about loyalty, about how she'd opened her home to me, about how hurt Ethan was, about how I was misguided and influenced. She ended with, I know you want to do the right thing. The right thing, in Diane's world, always meant the thing that protected her. I didn't respond. That was when the Whitmores started making mistakes. Because without me, the books weren't clean. Without me, the foundation's receipts weren't reconciled. Without me, numbers didn't match up neatly. Without me quietly catching discrepancies and smoothing them before they were noticed, the cracks started to show. Richard's lender requested additional documentation, a routine follow-up, the kind I'd handled before. Richard's assistant scrambled. The paperwork didn't line up. The lender pushed back. Then the foundation's event planner, overworked and underpaid, asked for a clear breakdown of expenses for an upcoming gala. Diane, furious, demanded it be done immediately. Brooke, who'd always treated the foundation like a fashion accessory, couldn't produce what was needed. Meanwhile, Ethan, still living in that house, was unraveling. He started calling late at night again, voice strained. My dad's losing it. My mom is blaming you for everything. They're saying you stole documents. Brooke says you're trying to blackmail them. Each call felt like a hook tugging at me, trying to pull me back into the role I'd played, fixer, buffer, protector. But I'd learned that every time I stepped in, the Whitmores grew more entitled. My help didn't soften them. It enabled them. So I stopped. I told Ethan, "Talk to your lawyer," and hung up. 2 weeks later, Susan called me with a tone that made my skin prickle. "There's an inquiry," she said. "About the foundation." My heart jolted. From who? "State regulators," Susan said carefully. "It looks like someone filed a complaint. They're requesting documents." I sat down hard on Maya's couch. Did you do that?" I asked, voice small. Susan paused. "No, and I'd advise you not to speculate. But complaints often come from inside organizations. Disgruntled employees, vendors, people who notice patterns." I thought of the event planner, the assistant, the bank emails, the way Richard's system depended on everyone staying quiet. When people are treated like disposable, they eventually act like they have nothing to lose. I swallowed. "What happens now?" Susan's voice was steady. "Now you protect yourself. You don't contact them. You document everything. And if anyone tries to implicate you, we respond with facts." Facts. The thing the Whitmores had always feared. That weekend, Ethan showed up again, and this time he looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. He stood in Maya's hallway, shoulders slumped, eyes wild. Maya hovered behind me like quiet backup. "They're being audited," Ethan whispered. I stared at him. "Who?" "The foundation," he said. "And the business might be next. My dad's saying it's because you left, that you..." His voice cracked. "That you triggered it." I felt my chest tighten. "I didn't file anything." Ethan shook his head, tears spilling. "I know. I think I know. But they don't care. They need someone to blame." There it was again. The machine looking for a replacement gear. Ethan stepped closer, voice urgent. "They're talking about telling investigators you managed the records. They're saying you had access. You were resentful. You could have..." My stomach turned, anger flaring so hot it cleared my fear. "Stop," I said sharply. Ethan froze. "I have documents," I said, voice low. "I have emails. I have proof that your father directed me. That he knew what he was doing." Ethan's face twisted in agony. "Claire, if you turn those over, it's over." "It's already over," I said. Ethan's eyes snapped to mine, raw. "You don't mean that." I took a slow breath. "Ethan, look at me. Your father threatened me. Your mother treated me like a servant. Your sister mocked me. And you..." My voice trembled, but I held it steady. "You watched. You asked me to endure it so you wouldn't have to fight." Ethan sobbed quietly, like a child. "I didn't know how to be in the middle." "You weren't in the middle," I said. "You were on their side. You just felt bad about it." Ethan's face crumpled. "I love you." I believed him, and it still wasn't enough. "Love isn't what you say when you're scared," I said softly. "It's what you choose when it costs you something." Ethan looked down, shaking. Maya shifted behind me, and I felt her presence like a spine. Ethan whispered, "What do you want me to do?" I swallowed. This was the moment where, in a different story, he would choose me. He would walk away from the Whitmore machine. He would become the husband I'd begged for in silence. But real life rarely delivers perfect arcs on cue. "I want you to tell the truth," I said, "to your lawyer, to the investigators, if it comes to that. Tell them I didn't create this. Tell them your father directed it." Ethan's eyes flickered with fear. "My dad will never forgive me." I held his gaze. "And I'll never forgive you if you let them destroy me." Ethan's breath hitched. He nodded once, small. "I'll try," he whispered. Try. The word of a man still tethered. But it was more than he'd offered before. After he left, I sat on the couch and stared at the wall, exhausted. Maya sank beside me. "You okay?" I let out a shaky laugh. "No." Maya nodded. "Yeah. That makes sense." A month later, Susan received a subpoena request for documents connected to Whitmore Community Futures. My name was on it, not as a target yet, but as a person with access. Susan looked at me over her glasses. "This is where we're careful, Claire. We comply legally, but we protect you. You provide what's required through counsel, nothing informal." My hands were cold. "Is it happening?" Susan's voice was calm. "It's happening." That night, I didn't sleep. I kept imagining news headlines, police at doors, my name tangled with words like fraud and embezzlement. I kept imagining Diane's smug face if she could pin it on me. I kept imagining Ethan's eyes as he begged me not to ruin us. Then I remembered Richard's smile when he told me family shares consequences. I realized something simple and fierce. I was done sharing consequences for sins that weren't mine. When the day came to provide documents, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow and steady, like a tree that had survived a storm by bending instead of breaking. Susan submitted the records, emails, folders, notes, carefully curated to show direction and intent. She included evidence of my attempts to clarify and my lack of authority. She made it clear I was not the architect. I was a tool they tried to use. Weeks passed. The Whitmores went quiet in a new way. Not the smug silence of control, but the frantic silence of people plugging leaks. Then the leaks became floods. A donor to the foundation withdrew publicly, citing concerns. A local journalist published a piece about charities under scrutiny, mentioning Whitmore Community Futures, among others. It wasn't a takedown yet. It was worse for Diane. It was curiosity. Curiosity invites questions. Questions invite audits. Audits invite truth. Diane stopped going to the country club. Brooke's social circle cooled. Richard stopped attending public events. The Whitmore house, once so loud with curated laughter, became a bunker. Ethan called me one night, voice barely above a whisper. "My dad's office got searched," he said. My stomach dropped. "By who?" "Investigators," he said. "They took computers, files. My mom is screaming. Brooke is blaming you." "My dad," he swallowed. "My dad looks scared." I felt a strange, aching sadness. Not for Richard exactly, but for the illusion I'd once believed in. The idea that their wealth meant stability, that their power meant safety, that if I endured, I'd be protected. "Ethan," I said quietly. Are you safe? He laughed bitterly, a broken sound. Safe? No, I'm in a war zone. A part of me wanted to ask, are you finally seeing it? Are you finally understanding what it cost me? But I didn't, because I wasn't his therapist. I wasn't his buffer. I wasn't his lifeline anymore. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it in the human way, not the sacrificial way. But I can't fix this. Ethan's voice cracked. I don't want you to fix it. I don't want to lose you. The words twisted my chest. I closed my eyes. Ethan, you didn't lose me in one moment. You lost me slowly. Every time you stayed quiet. Every time you asked me to swallow something sharp. Every time you chose comfort over courage. Silence on the line. Then softly, I know. I exhaled, shaky. I hope you find a way to live with that. He whispered, Do you hate me? I thought about Diane's smile, Richard's threats, Brooke's sneer. I thought about Ethan's hands on my face when he kissed me, the softness that had been real. I thought about the nights I'd cried quietly into a pillow so no one would hear. I don't hate you, I said. But I'm not coming back. Ethan sobbed once, quietly. Okay. After we hung up, I stared at my phone until the screen went dark. The grief was still there, but something else was there too. Space. Breath. A future that wasn't shaped by their house. My separation finalized faster than I expected, partly because the Whitmores wanted damage control. Diane wanted me gone with as little noise as possible. Richard wanted me quiet. Brooke wanted to pretend I'd never existed. They offered a settlement again. More money this time. Susan negotiated hard, ensuring it wouldn't come with the kind of silence clause that could trap me. The final agreement wasn't a fairy tale windfall, but it was enough to stand on. I moved out of Maya's apartment into a small one-bedroom with old hardwood floors and imperfect paint. The first night, I sat on the floor eating takeout from the carton because I hadn't unpacked plates yet. I've never felt richer. My new job came through a former coworker who'd heard I was available. It wasn't glamorous. It was steady. The office had fluorescent lights and stale coffee and people who didn't care what my husband's last name was. They cared that I showed up, that I did my work, that I told the truth. The first time I signed my name on a document at that job, I paused, pen hovering. I wrote Claire Whitmore out of habit, then stopped. The name felt like a costume that no longer fit. I crossed it out and wrote Claire Bennett, my maiden name, my real name. My hand shook as I did it. Then it steadied. Months later, the Whitmore story became public in the way Diane had always feared. Not with a dramatic movie-style downfall, but with slow, humiliating exposure. Reports, investigations, board resignations, donor withdrawals. Legal filings. People who'd once laughed at Diane's parties now spoke her name with a careful, distancing tone. People who'd once praised Richard now pretended they'd always sensed something off. The Whitmores didn't go to prison overnight. Real life wasn't that neat. But their world cracked. Their image fractured, their control weakened, and I didn't have to lift a finger to make it happen. I had simply stopped protecting their secrets. That was the part no one told you. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't revenge. It's withdrawal. When you stop covering for people, they have to face the weight of their own choices. One afternoon, almost a year after I left, I ran into Ethan at a grocery store. It was so ordinary it felt unreal. He was in the produce aisle, staring at avocados like he didn't know how to choose one. He looked older. Not in a dramatic way, but in a worn way, like someone who'd lived too long in denial and finally run out of places to hide. He saw me and froze. For a second, we just stood there, the fluorescent lights buzzing softly above us, shoppers moving around like our history wasn't a storm cloud between us. Ethan swallowed. Claire. I nodded once. Ethan. His eyes flicked over me, as if checking for damage. Maybe he expected me to look broken. Maybe he expected me to look bitter. I didn't feel either. I felt solid, like someone who'd rebuilt slowly, brick by brick, without needing applause. "How are you?" he asked, voice quiet. "I'm okay," I said honestly. "I'm good, actually." Ethan's eyes glistened. He looked down at the avocados again, like he needed something to hold on to. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I studied him. The apology was late, but it sounded real. "I know," I said. He looked up, pain sharp. "Do you ever think about if we'd left sooner?" I thought about it. About who we might have been if Ethan had chosen me in daylight, if he'd stepped out of his family's shadow, if he'd fought. "Yes," I said softly, "but I don't live there anymore." Ethan nodded, throat working. "My dad thinks you ruined him." I almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Your dad ruined himself." Ethan's shoulders sagged. "Yeah." We stood in silence again. Then Ethan said, voice raw, "You were never a burden." The words hit me harder than I expected, because they were the words I'd wanted for so long, from him, from anyone in that family. I felt my throat tighten, but I held it steady. "I know." Ethan blinked fast. "I didn't deserve you." That one, too, landed heavy. "I didn't need you to deserve me," I said gently. "I needed you to choose me." Ethan closed his eyes briefly, as if the truth physically hurt. When he opened them, he looked at me like a man seeing something he'd lost and finally understanding the cost. "I hope you're happy," he whispered. I nodded. "I'm getting there." Ethan stepped back, giving me space. "Good," he said, and it sounded like blessing and grief combined. I walked away with a basket full of groceries and a heart that felt strangely light. Later, at home, I put my groceries away in my own kitchen. I wiped down my own counters because I liked them clean, not because anyone demanded it. I cooked dinner for myself, music playing, windows open. I thought about the Whitmore house, the chandelier, the polished floors, the smiles that cut. I thought about Diane calling me temporary, about Richard calling my involvement family, about Brooke laughing as if cruelty was entertainment. I thought about how I'd tried to earn love by being smaller, quieter, easier. And I thought about the moment I walked out the door in the cold air, suitcase in hand, heart steady with terror and freedom. They had treated me like a burden. But the truth was, I had been their safeguard, their silence, their cleaner, their cushion. When I stopped protecting their secrets, their world didn't collapse because I attacked it. It collapsed because it had been built on lies, and I was the one person holding the lies in place. I wasn't a burden. I was the weight-bearing wall. And once I stepped away, the cracks they'd ignored for years finally showed. I ate dinner at my small table, alone but not lonely, and felt something settle deep in my bones, something I'd been searching for in that big, perfect house and never found. Peace. Not the fake peace of keeping quiet so others can stay comfortable. Real peace. The kind you earn when you stop betraying yourself. And that was the thing the Whitmores could never buy, no matter how much money they moved around in the dark.